Hello, everyone. Sylvia here from Rock the Cradle. How are you? We're here with another episode of our Friday Live Doula Dialogues. I love doing these shows. I get to speak with some amazing people every week. I get to share these conversations that I have with you, and I'm learning so much and having a great time. I hope you are too. Today's guest is Odessa Thornhill, and I see she's on now. I'm going to get her on for us. Oh, shoot. Oh, here we go. Odessa, I'm adding you on. If you're on and watching, let us know. Here is the lovely Odessa.
How
Hey,
are you?
I'm well. Look how quickly we got on.
Yes, with a lot of practice.
I watch these. I do these exercise videos on their Beachbody on the online, and the one I'm watching, the woman complains every time about her bands or about the air condition. On my Doula Dialogues, me, it's the technology. The listeners will know that it's getting people on. It must be Facebook. Maybe Facebook is clunky. Anyway, my apologies
Yes,
to everybody.
that's okay.
So, how are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm well. Yourself?
Oh, really well. I'm so glad we could connect,
Yeah.
and especially about this topic. I've been following you for a long time now, and I was like, the womb. We don't talk enough. We don't use that word enough. And I really wanted to delve in with you today about that. But before we do, just so everyone can situate who Odessa is, Odessa and I met in our doula training. We were doing, I believe, the birth doula training. And I think I had my third baby. She was only 2 months.
Yes.
You had maybe two babies at that time, one baby at the time, and she now has four, four babies. She's an expert. And since then, I mean, at the time you were also singing and dancing, and now you've come this whole 180.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
I think it was all somehow in the making. I had always had a very strong passion for healing before I actually got deeper into singing. And I was touring and doing the work that I was doing with Cirque du Soleil. I was dancing with a different company and just, very much into my artistic life. And I started to just want to know more about healing the womb because I began that journey within myself. And and one thing I really wanted to connect to was the energy of birth. What does that mean? What does birth mean? And as a woman, especially as a woman of color, I'm melanated, birth looks very different for me as it does for you.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I started off in that direction, just wanting to get a better foundation, a more solid foundation to be able to move in that direction of healing. But for me, just to kind of tie it in together, I'm coming to this point where the healing and the performance are starting to connect.
I know, and I read that on your website, and I'm like, wow, how interesting is that?
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing that you're putting both of them, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
The bodies it's movement, it is energy. The birth requires that, performing requires that.
Yeah.
And
and it's all focused in primarily in the womb and other areas of the body as well too, but the womb, like the creativity, right? The ability to create that idea, that inspiration, to catch it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yes. And it's not something we talk about.
No.
Like, caregivers don't talk about our wombs.
No, not in that.
We talk about them. We're aware of them. I think as doulas, of course, we're aware of them. We are more in that space of fertility. And, we hear about cases of women going on their fertility journeys, and we'll talk about that today.
Yes.
And not being able to get pregnant, having endometriosis. There are millions of women in the world who are having this, and I'm sure you'll talk about why are these factors coming up. Environment, what we're eating, all of this type of stuff, I'm sure plays a part. but that word, I find we don't tap into our wombs and our self
No.
as much as we should. And
Yeah.
it's coming. It's coming. I see the changes in women like you who are bringing it out into the open much more.
Yeah.
So you're a naturopath, a wombness, what is it?
Womb wellness mentor.
Womb wellness mentor, uh, Reiki healer. I would imagine. Like
Yeah.
I call you an all of it intuitive healer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way that I chose to learn, because you can choose, and especially in today's age, you can choose how you're going to connect you know, your gifts, your talents with what you've learned and how you present it to the world, right?
Right.
And as a healer, as a naturopath, a Quebec certified naturopath, I really wanted to learn the different kinds of healing modalities and how they all come together, and so the energy work, like we all have it, sometimes you think of someone and they show up, or you rub someone and they're like, oh my goodness, that felt so great, or that quote unquote sixth sense, that wit that we have, you know what I mean, especially as women, especially as
intuition.
this is it, and without getting so deep into it. And I agree, we don't speak enough about that. We don't speak enough about how it connects to the womb, and why it connects to the womb, and how we as birth workers need to delve deeper into understanding that, because we support women. It's a portal, and what really comes with being a gatekeeper, you know what I mean, as a womb carrier, born as a woman, whether your womb was removed from you, whether you choose to identify as a woman or not, but you're a womb carrier. You know what I mean? There's so much to think about. And then, you also touched on infertility, like that part is so crucial, because part of it is definitely, genetics or congenital issues that you might be born with. Some women are not born with full organs, pieces might be missing. You may have just very serious hormonal imbalances. You're not ovulating, you're ovulating too much, you've never seen your period. It's just, and then and this is just talking about one part of the, we do this.
It's like a small part.
Such a tiny part, and there's that aspect of it. And then there's also, conditioning that we've taken on from society, from our family, which make us think a certain way, which influences our physical bodies, and sometimes we're sick because we put ourselves there, and so as a creative, spark, that's what fertility is, right? Like the idea of spring, the idea of plants, the idea of seeds, you know what I mean, the idea of ideas. If we put a lot of constriction around it, it has to look like this, I want it to go like that, I need it to be like this, and if it doesn't go like that, then you know what I mean. And some women put themselves in that position, and so that takes away from the spontaneity. Sometimes infertility comes because you haven't let go of issues, and so it's blocking your womb from holding onto this new idea, because something is stopping it. There's so many ways to approach healing. So when I'm working with clients in that way, I'm just going to kind of jump,
we're jumping right into, let's jump into the I wanted to, you're going to talk about, I think there's that emotional aspect that you started talking about. And then there's a lot of the physical aspects that I think a lot of women see, but don't necessarily relate the two. And I see that's where you're bringing us now. So yes, let's talk, just so you all know, we're going to be talking fertility, talking probably most likely postpartum, the wellness of our wombs after birth. Any questions you all may have, please let us know. Post them, and if you're on the replay, post them, and I go back and check the questions for sure. So jump in. Fertility issues. Like you're saying, it's a small part of it, and that emotional side to the healing.
So something that I I try to simplify it. I'm like, no, I'm just way out there, you know? So, and I like to tell these stories.
Well, I said we only have a half an hour, but this conversation has so many
It
levels. I was
does.
like, what level do I bring this on? I
Yeah,
think we'll keep
yeah,
it at this level,
yeah,
but another talk would be bringing it to
yeah, yeah, for
so much
sure, for
deeper.
sure.
But we can touch, we can be,
This is it.
you know.
The very intro of it is life begins with water, right? And the, you know, tears are an expression of emotions, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, water is a conduit, right? So when we think of emotions, right? When we think of energy motions in the body, right? When we think of fluid in the body, right? And when we think of birth and life and water, right? There's such a beautiful connection that brings us back to the womb, and the womb is the seat of emotions. In, you know, in the chakra system, it's the color orange, it's creativity, it's the emotions, it's how you express yourself, but the throat also does something there too, right? But that is a very basic piece of the puzzle, because there's 7 major principles, qualities, areas of life that we can look at, and then we can, you know, break them down into more. But how the emotions connect to an individual connect very much to their ability to reproduce, right? Connects very much to you know, how it's going to taint their thinking, you know, so that paradigm. And so when these energy motions that flow through the body, right, when there's stagnation, you know, there's not enough energy, oxygen, circulation to move the energy in the body, it can get stuck, right? And primarily in the womb, it's very magnetic. It's a magnetic energy. It pulls in. It's connected to the moon, and the moon is magnetic, right? So that's a whole other conversation there.
That's another one, yeah.
Right? But when we put them all together, you know, especially for women, when there's an emotional imbalance, we can see it through the connection of our reproductive system. We can see it in PMS symptoms. We can see it in menstrual cramps. We can see it in, you know, just our disposition on, you know, how we relate to people. You know, it's just, it's quite something.
It's everything. It's everything. You know, when we talk about this,
Cysts.
I was saying we need therapy, because, you know, if we're holding on to everything, it's not surprising that people are having problems getting pregnant, right? And for having fertility issues and other issues. If we're holding it all here, I took a meditation course about a month ago, and we talked about breathing and, you know, being just conscious of where we breathe. And as a doula, we do this with our clients. Where are people breathing? And many of us have shallow breaths, and the air is not even going down to the womb. You know? And when, you know, and in birth too, it's that whole flow of what you were saying, right? So not surprising what you're talking about, that the emotional factors can totally lead to not the result we want.
Well, this is it, you know, and I think the last thing I would say to kind of, you know, put the cap on top of it, so to speak, is, you know, the womb, the fallopian tubes, they're hollow organs, right? Quote unquote, hollow organs. And so think of emotions. I like to give the idea of Pigpen, you know, Charlie Brown and Pigpen, and he always had a lot of, you know, des choses mélangées, you know, everything was around him, you know, and that's how energetically we carry things. And energetically, it can fill up the space of the womb like that. You see? So that emotional, that's like one way to, you know, give a visual of how, you know, and so it can be in around the body, you know, so it can anywhere. But if we're thinking specifically of the womb and reproductive wellness, that's very important. And so that deep breathing, like you mentioned, is so important. And I mean, you know, sometimes I have conversations with friends. I'm like, did you breathe yet? And like in the whole 5 minutes we're here having a conversation
about something so natural, but not so natural at the same time, to do it well. And what type of work, I would imagine you work with clients to clear the energy, or to change the energy? What's the language? Like, what do you do with them during this stage?
I call it mind, body, soul, and womb wellness, because we talk about, you know, what you're eating. We talk about how you're living, you know, what's your environment like, what's your physical body experiencing, how's your sleeping, how's your rest, things that we all think about and kind of have an idea of or, you know, ignore, right? I talk about this, and then we talk about like, what is that mindset around it? You know, so what do you have to do to bring yourself, you know what I mean, to look at it differently, to become aware of it differently, to, you know what I mean, like that kind of, then we look at, you know, emotionally the spirit as well too. Okay, so how are these things showing up in different areas of my life, right? Because if you can't see it here, like, you know, there's more than one way to solve a math equation, right? Usually there's more than one way. So if you translate it to other areas of your life, oh, I have this problem here that I've been working with and I can't seem to get any headway on it. Well, it might show up emotionally, it might show up mentally, it might show up in your environment. You see, so when we begin to kind of create a pastiche, you know, of what your life looks like, you know, and then I just kind of, but I encourage your alignment because it's your wellness, it's your journey, you know. So these are the things, and so using my intuition, I can kind of help you to develop yours, you know, so you can, you know, really work on your healing journey, because I don't want people to be dependent on me. I want people to, you know, so really teaching you how to develop that. You know,
when it comes to physical, let's, you know, women who are not having their periods, say, I mean, that is, that are those, and say endometriosis and these things, fibroids and all of these, is that a symptom of the emotional? How does that tie into the emotional? Is it always all emotional, or is it half half? Is it a, you know, these things are happening? Is it, yeah?
there
What's
are
your take?
always physical signs that we're going to look for, right? We're going to look at, you know, does your period come regularly? What are these other symptoms that you're having in your physical body? You know, are you ovulating? And if so, when is it coming? You know, what is your discharge looking like? You know, what is your basal temperature looking like? You know, how are we charting these things? You have to look at this first, you know, because your cycle is the most intimate, you know, aspect of yourself that belongs to you for women, you know. I mean, for men it shows up differently because everyone, you know, has their cycles that they go through, but this is very personal. So we look at that, and then we look at, okay, so what are the other aspects that are going to influence it? So I think it's important for people to know that emotionally these things are going to show up, but you also have to have a really good idea of what's happening in your physical body, because the last piece is you don't want your doctor or your primary caregiver to dismiss you because you are not able to speak clearly about how your physical body is presenting itself.
Well, that's the thought I just had, is that most of the caregivers that we work with, we do a lot of hospital births in my group. The first thing is either dismissing what we're actually feeling, no, there's no problem, or medication, right? And I think that's where you come, you know, where we come along as holistic doulas and workers. It's really getting to the heart of the problem. And I see this a lot in the postpartum. You know, they'll take a look at your cervix, they'll give you a prescription for birth control, but they're not asking, how are you doing? Let's get, you know, and asking those questions. Maybe they just don't have time, but that's something that we see often, which I'm sure you do as well.
I think part of it has to do with how doctors have been trained. Right. And, you know, being a doula means that we're carrying on a tradition that's eons, you know, ages old. And with the influx of medical and scientific, you know, relation to the woman, you know what I mean, and her body, you know, that part, these parts that we're discussing right now really got pushed to the side, you know. And I agree with you. It's so much more than, you know, how my cervix, my physical body is behaving, you know. It's a portal. I push somebody out of me, or if, you know, you have to go in and help this person to be born. Like, come on.
Superpowers. Hi, Ida, and Nia are online.
Hi.
We need to educate girls as soon as they get their periods how to read the signs. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I always have an aside. There's girls in my kids' classes. They're like 9, 10 years old getting their periods now. That's a whole other,
Yeah.
when we talk about what we're eating, and it's that responsibility is coming very soon.
Yes.
And womb wellness, yeah. And many of us can't even talk about our own womb wellness. So how do we educate our
This
children?
is it. This is it. Yeah. Yeah. I felt like, you know, it took me having my daughter, my firstborn, to really start connecting to my womb, because I was like, what am I going to offer her, you know?
Yeah.
And that really was the question that came to mind, you know, and so I think one of the first things that I began by doing was putting my hand over my womb and just, you know, connecting, having these conversations. At first it was so bizarre, you know, it was bizarre, like talking to
Yeah.
myself. But, you know, I began to hear, you know, I began to get impressions, and, you know, just that quote unquote gut feeling that, you know, those promptings, they come forward, you know. But I think one of the biggest things that, you know, we should all um, do when it comes to connecting to your womb and what, you know, starting on this journey of healing and what does it look like, is really listen to the intuition, especially if you connect to your womb and, you know, you ask a question and you get an answer that you might think doesn't, like, I don't really think like this, you know, and
Yeah.
follow that, because that's probably, you know, your body telling you that you should do something different.
I think I'll name her. I'll name my womb. It's an entity in all
It
its
is.
own.
It is.
Superpowers.
She
Same
has
with
them.
my children.
Yeah.
Let's talk. I'll go to postpartum.
Mhm.
A lot of healing needs to be done postpartum. Do you work with people with traumatic births, or like who do you see most? Are there people that have issues? Have they come from a traumatic birth? Is it, yeah, who are you seeing in your practice?
Variation. A
Mm,
variation. There are some women who don't know that they've had trauma and
that's
they're
true.
experiencing trauma.
Yeah.
There are women who feel empowered throughout the process. Um, I work postpartum wise. I have clients who I was preparing with before, and then I have some who I'm taking on specifically afterwards. So sometimes I'm not, you know, so as you're taking them on, especially in that postpartum period, I think for me it's just a question of really holding space, you know, because you don't know if they want to share deeply, you know, or like I mentioned, if they've taken it on. And for those who've worked with me before, I've prepared them,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
through, especially through the physical exercises, because that's really important. The deep breathing, like you're mentioning, and you know, like how to do self massages, and you know, just like, you know, how do you,
Of the perineum you're
of the
talking about.
perineum, but also of your physical
Of
body.
the
Yeah,
womb, of your,
yeah, of your
yes.
womb, of
Yeah.
your hips, you know, like, you know.
Well, after birth, Odessa, we don't want to touch that area, do we? We don't.
No,
We don't.
we don't, you know.
We don't. Especially, and if you have a cesarean, a lot of women don't want
Yeah,
to even
that's
acknowledge.
right.
There's shame there.
That's
There's
right.
guilt.
That's right.
There's all, and those negative
That's
emotions,
it. That's
which
it.
bring back that what we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
That negative emotion, which needs healing.
Yes,
Which needs
it
healing.
does, which is why for me, like knowing or feeling your hands, right, on
Mm.
your body in loving ways, you know, is one of the first ways of healing that I have found postpartum wise, especially, you know.
To touch ourselves, to
Yeah,
touch, to
yeah.
get to know our
This
bodies
is
and
it. You
our,
know what I mean? Like how do you do, you know, like really quick joint massages on yourself?
mm,
My postpartum periods were very difficult. I have a really hard time in my hips. And
mm,
so like I spent a lot of time doing that, massaging or rubbing or wrapping the hips up,
yes,
you know, really creating stability, very passive movement, different things that help to encourage the different rhythms in the body to come back together, the cranial rhythms, the ligaments, the bones, the soft tissues. So, you know, all of these, this is why it's so important for women in general to get familiar with their physical bodies. And then, you know, because then you bring it, that kind of confidence that you have in, you know, your ability to birth, your ability to, you know, accept what you experienced during birth if it wasn't your ideal experience. And then, you know, how you encourage and talk to yourself, because you have to be your own cheerleader when you're
You do.
postpartum, especially, right? If you don't have that support, or if the support you have, if you don't have that support, whatever that looks like to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And, you know, we'll talk a lot about, oh, you know, yes, go and see an osteopath after birth or a pelvic
Yeah.
floor
Especially. Yes.
specialist. But I think there is all of that. There's that. I come back to that emotional healing after birth that we don't necessarily look at
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're very keen on the physical. I think that's something we see.
Yes.
The womb is something we don't see.
No.
And I always say postpartum, if our wombs and our uteruses that are bleeding, that have given birth,
Yeah.
are on the exteriors of our bodies, we would be so much kinder to ourselves.
Yeah.
We would take the time to heal because we would see it.
Yes.
In our society, we
Yes.
don't, you know, no, we don't see our womb. So in our society, we're just up and, you know, in the skinny jeans and out the door, you know, and that's pressure we feel.
Yes.
So taking that time to, I have heard a lot about, I mean, there are different modalities I would imagine that you, again, work with postpartum.
Yeah.
I would like you to address the yoni steam.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot of, some women have started asking us about this, and I would, you know, what is that? What
Yeah.
is that? If you'd like to.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, for sure, for sure. I think I would just touch on the emotional aspect for a quick
Yes.
second, yeah.
Yes, of course.
Because what you mentioned it again, and in one of the trainings that I did with Indigimama, she's a she does a hip closing ceremonies
Yeah.
in the Mexican traditional Mexican medicine style. And one thing she speaks about is, you know, the energy of the woman being outside of her body, you know, so we energetically open up, right? And so of course we're hormonal, and you know, the emotions are fluctuating and you're feeling a particular way. And so, you know, part of that is really acknowledging what you're feeling, you know, really acknowledge and validate yourself, validate the experience regardless of how it presented itself. In the end, your child's birth is also very specific to that child, you know, that's part of their journey here. So we have to honor that part of it as well too. So really validating yourself, and then giving yourself time to, you know, experience it. If you feel angry, be angry. If you're, you know, excited or happy, be excited and happy. And so you mentioned the modalities. And you
Yeah,
mentioned,
because we were talking even just now, the closing of the bones. We have a doula on our team, Mika, who practices this and offers these, and they're beautiful. Part ceremony, part honoring the mother afterwards, bringing, like you said, everything is so open, bringing it back. What does that look like physically for people? It's wrapping the mom in rebozos, in shawls, and it's centering on the mother after, and honoring all that she's been through.
yes,
Of course,
yeah,
it goes much deeper than that, but on here we'll leave it
like,
at that.
yeah,
But yeah, modalities, yeah, postpartum modalities. What
yeah.
I mentioned yoni steam, but I'm sure there's other things that that you must do.
Yoni steaming, I do other things, but yoni steaming, I like that because what happens is, you know, the steam, what we do is we prepare hot water, boiling water, you add herbs to it, you let it cool to the appropriate temperature, and mom will sit over an open stool, or stoop or squat, depending on, you know, whether she has access to a stool or not. But when I work with them, they sit on a throne, and the steam from the water and the volatile oils from the plant nourish the perineum, And the steam and the same aromas, they enter into the vagina, up into the vagina to the cervix, and it begins to nourish the womb. So it encourages excess blood to come down, right? Because the womb needs to clean itself out. There's so much that's still inside of there.
Yes. Yeah.
And it cleans it, it cleanses it, it nourishes it, it tonifies it. The same thing that it would do in any other time of the month is the same thing that it does during postpartum, but very much helps to clean out the afterbirth. And also relaxes mom, because there's just so much that's gone on there, right? It's a trauma. And when you think about, you know, your physical body, if you've had injuries or surgeries or, you know, just stress, and you go to a sauna, you really feel good. Like, think of your face, you know, you go in there looking like this and then you get relaxed.
You do if you like that. I mean, we often will tell people, yes, do your sitz baths. You know, you want to heal the perineum, and I even just say, it's just you know, take it because it's 10 minutes that you get alone by yourself, you know, away from baby and your family, just for you. Even if you're sitting on the toilet bowl. But this, I find the Oni steam is much more. There's more ceremony to it. The steam and the heat. For me, I that would be amazing. Not something that I had the opportunity or the privilege to have during my births, or after my births. But I know it's we're talking about it more, and again, because we're talking more about the womb, and we're talking about how women are feeling after birth, and all of these things are coming up, which I think is amazing. It's really amazing. So you touch upon so many different things. We're talking nutrition. Even I would imagine postpartum nutrition, we talk about that. You know, for milk production, you talk about sound therapy with your music. I would imagine movement. Anything else? There's so many things.
I mean, I think it's just, you know, really, like I mentioned, I really wanted to know different things. So like, there's also like that journaling aspect, you know, sometimes speaking it, or, you know, like, you know, you're not focusing on eating, you know, some women really struggle with different aspects, you know, so there's journaling, there's coloring, you know what I mean? Different kinds of ways of processing your birth, supporting you through nutrition, having really mineral dense foods, you know, and mineral rich herbs, nettle, alfalfa, burdock root. You know, if you eat meat, you know, you can do things like bone broth. If you don't eat meat, you know, you do things like congis, or really heavy broths, right? With ground foods. And I like to include, whether you eat meat or not, I like to put in those moringas and nettles and alfalfas, you know, because it just, they're mineral rich, they're mineral dense. And so it just helps to build up the blood, because that's what you need. Red foods, black foods, you know, blue, dark, you know, foods. And so breathing is really important. Using crystals, I like to use crystals. Really simple stones like rose quartz, because it encourages unconditional love. Anything pink and green, purple and clear, you know, because we're dealing with the heart, we're dealing with grounding as well too. Black stones.
Odessa, we could go into, like, I think we need a class on talk on crystals. We need to talk on nutrition. We need it's wonderful to end. I mean, I mean, people can reach, you can reach Odessa. She's based in Toronto. I believe you're in Toronto right now. Do you do online work? Is it sometimes you can, some of the teaching is online. So Cultivate Your Own Holistic Wellness is her Facebook page, her website. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Thank you.
Very short talk on all of, I mean, we just touched the surface. I know we did, but I like, you know, it gets people thinking.
It does.
Getting that, let's talk about the wombs more. Let's touch ourselves more. Let's touch others more. So lovely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lovely to chat. I'm glad we could do this. And I'm going to come back to you. Let's talk crystals next time. I like the crystals.
For sure.
Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful day, everyone. next week we're talking with Jennifer Benedict, and we're talking about a totally different subject. She's a speech therapist and works with children. So we're going to be talking language. So we're going to move up the body to another chakra. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Take care. Thank you again for
Bye.
having me. Bye-bye.
Oh, my pleasure. Bye.